How many of you enjoy family road trips? What comes to your mind when you think about family road trips? Now what's that? Chaos, that's true. Your memories may be fond or it may be chaos as you recall the pleasurable memories of being together in that car hour after hour after hour. Now, I know you've never had those moments in the car when mom has finally had to remind everyone about the circle of life. Now, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's that moment when she's finally had it, because dad's just blissfully driving, and she says, I brought you into this world and I can take you out of it. The circle of life. And that usually comes just before another declaration. This is the last time we are ever doing this. It's never the last time, though. We always do it again. In the midst of all of that unrest and chaos about the length of the trip that we're on, the discussion turns toward anticipating what's going to happen when we arrive. We start to anticipate, what ride am I going to go on first? What kinds of things are we going to see? The things we can do at the beach. Figuring out how many times we can have s'mores. We get so excited about what's going to happen when we finally reach the destination that the trip becomes more tolerable along the way. Now, I hope you see where I'm headed with this, what holds true for a family on a road trip. It's true on the highway of life as well. We lose our sense of joy when we lose sight of our destination. God knew what he was doing when he gave us the book of Revelation through the Apostle John. It's in that last book of the Bible that God gives us one of the best promises upon which to build our unshakable hope. And the promise is, I am making all things new. Here's the promise as it's found in the entire verse. He who was seated on the throne, this is the vision that is given to John, said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. The entire verse for me just helps to build the sense of anticipation that we can count on it. His words are trustworthy. They are true. One day he will make everything new. Revelation is the book that focuses on the second coming of Jesus. And I find it helpful to me as I've been looking forward to that second coming to be able to put into context the first coming of Jesus. As the book and with it the Bible come to an end, God gives John a revelation of our destination because he knows we're going to need it along the way. We are going to look at what God is going to do out there still future, even as we start to look back at what he did that first Christmas. And as we do, I have a confession that I need to make. At this time of the year, I can often be heard saying something like, I hate Christmas. True, huh, John? It's not that I hate Christmas. I just don't like a lot of the things associated now with Christmas. Like Christmas trees, 15-foot Christmas trees that inevitably never work in the lobby, Christmas lights, all of that goes with it. I love the message of Christmas about how God sent his son, his one and only son, into the world that whoever believes in him might be saved. But I think when everything is made new, some of those things will not be in that part of what we do in heaven. Christmas trees will not be there. I look forward to Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is the most wonderful night of the year. It is. When we think about how God stepped in to our world to be able not just to say that I love you, but to really show it. But that message seems to get lost sometimes in the tinsel and the garland and the wrapping paper. And so I turn into the child in the car on the road trip, wondering, when are we going to get there? But being able to see past all of this to the reality of what God promises to do in the future, it's just the boost that I need. And maybe it will help you too, as we read from Revelation chapter 21 this morning, looking ahead. Then I saw, John writes, a new heaven and a new earth. For the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. We looked at that verse last week. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people." That's what he started to do when he made his home among us here on earth. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. And when he's with us, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there'll be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All of these things are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." And then he said, "Write this down. For what I tell you, it's trustworthy. It's true." God's promises. The promises of a new Jerusalem in our future. A new heaven, a new earth are just ahead on the road of life, and God is making everything new. Now, the Greek word here for new means new in the sense of being renewed or restored, as opposed to being brand new, like the word he used in Genesis 1 when he created out of nothing. I experienced that the importance of being renewed or restored in a hotel that's being refurbished. When that's happening and the work is in progress, you really want to be in one of the rooms that has already undergone the transformation from old to new. So God gives John this vision of restoring everything to the way that he originally intended it to be when he created the heavens and the earth, and he declared it to be very good. If you have the time, I know, not likely during this Christmas season, but if you have the time, do a study where you flip back and forth between Genesis and Revelation. Maybe just read the books, looking for parallels. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. At the end, God recreates the heavens and the earth. God restores what was lost in the 3rd chapter of Genesis when sin entered the world through Adam and Eve. Through Jesus coming that first time, God begins the process of reversing the curse. John also talks here about the sea being gone. What's that about? Well, in the ancient world, the sea represents chaos. It represented evil. It was a place where monsters lurked beneath the surface. It was a place of uncertainty. When everything is made new, chaos disappears. And with chaos eliminated, all pain and crying and sorrow and death, all of that uncertainty, it is gone forever. God never intended for those things to be a part of his creation. And it was for that reason that he sent Jesus to earth. The birth of Jesus was a part where God began the process of being able to set things back on the original course. Those expressions of our broken world will not be a part of his recreation when he makes everything new. But like kids on a road trip, we want to know, are we there yet? And we're not. We're not there yet. We aren't home. You don't really need me to tell you that today, do you? You're reminded of it every day. especially with 6 fewer shopping days between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We're reminded of it every time we notice a gray hair or a new wrinkle or a knee that hurts as we once again begin to try to negotiate those steps. Oh, those confounded steps. We're reminded when our differences remain irreconcilable. We're reminded when we see dementia robbing the mind of a loved one. We're reminded when disease continues to erode the body. We're reminded every time death deals another unexpected goodbye that we have to deal with. We're reminded that the old is passing away, but it isn't gone yet. And so through John, God assures us that the new and the better, it is on the way. God thought it was worth writing that to us, so I think it's worth remembering. Here's the first memory marker of 2 we have this morning. People of the promise. That's what we are. People of the promise remember the future. We spend a lot of time remembering the past. For some of us, remembering the past, it's a very pleasant activity. It's filled with nostalgia. It creates the illusion of those good old days. And listening to some people, you would have to think that the best days are behind us. Others of us expend energy on the past because it's not that it was so pleasant, but that it was so painful. We'd much rather be able to just forget about the past. But our thoughts gravitate back to those dark, difficult places. And there are times we become so fixated on the past that we get stuck there. The future looks impossible, and even the present is almost too much to handle. There are others where the only thing that matters is right now. We live in the moment because you only live once. Take what life gives you right now and go for it. So there's nothing that's really automatically wrong about recalling the past or reveling in the present. It can be good, it can be pleasant, it can be wonderful, but how often do we spend time remembering the future? Almost feels like a movie, doesn't it? Where we go back to the future. Now, I'm not talking about the future as it involves who you're going to marry, what your job will be, or where you're going to retire someday. I'm talking about your future, your eternal future. We're talking about your forever future, where God calls us to remember that which is coming. How much time do we devote to thinking about those things that are eternal and what that will be like? Look at this encouragement that comes from the Apostle Paul, where he tells us, since you have been raised to new life, and there's that word new again, new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, is revealed to the whole world, you will share in all his glory. And so we are challenged to set our sights on the realities of heaven. And I love that combination of words, the realities of heaven, because they are real. And that's where God used John to be able to display some of those realities so we could have a picture of where it is that we are setting our hearts and our minds. Heaven often seems to be something that's out there somewhere, sometime. Those realities are to be our focal point. Our minds are to settle into the forever things of heaven rather than being dominated by the temporary things of earth. Doesn't mean we withdraw from the world. It means that what we do is we put this world into eternal perspective. We live in this life with the next world sharply in focus. It makes the power of Christ available to us. People of the promise remember the future. In addition, the second memory marker is this. People of the promise live in light of the future. It makes a difference in the way that we live. Now, Paul's not calling us to an artificial escapist retreat from the world with our heads in the clouds. He calls us to live now in our world in light of what lasts then in the next world. Now, don't brush that thought off too quickly. Paul calls us to live now in light of what is going to last forever in eternity. And so we have to ask, what gets my time? Where is my energy spent? Where do my thoughts go? What do I major in when I really get to thinking? Is it the minor things of this world or the major things, the major priorities of eternity? We tend, I think, to major on what Paul called wood, hay, and stubble, things that are going to be burned up. Our lives are dominated by things that will rust, that decay, are destroyed. We're to live instead in light of the future. I've found that C.S. Lewis is always a good place to help us sharpen perspective. Here's what he wrote. If you read history, if you look back, you will find that Christians who did the most for the present world were those who thought most of the next. Paul makes it clear that he wanted to experience Christ. He wanted to know the power of that resurrection. He understood that this life of pursuing Christ likeness, of becoming like Jesus, that it is a lifetime pursuit. There isn't any place where any of us in this life, where we ever arrive at that final destination, we're never able to say, becoming like Jesus, becoming completely like Jesus, accomplished, check that one off the list. It's a lifetime pursuit where we are being renewed in his image. God is making us new. Just a few verses later in Colossians 3, Paul told the Colossians this. Put on your new nature. So this is something that we do. We put on that new nature. But look, there's a process that follows. And be renewed. So you put on the new nature, but then you are renewed, and that's a constant ongoing renewal as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. That's the restoration that God's doing in us, getting us ready for that day when he will make all things new. Look at what happens then through us when we sign on to what God wants us to do. In the same way, Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. When we live in light of the future, the light shines. Others see, and they give glory to God as God restores us, as he makes us new. He restores us so we can be part of the restoration process in someone else's life. Here's the way I picture it. My life is to be such that it should be like a 5-star TripAdvisor review, recommending God's way as the best way to take this trip through life. And yet I say I hate Christmas. One of the great benefits I receive in my profession as pastor is having a front row seat to see that process take place. As God uses people, as he uses his church, as Jesus works to be able to help make things new. I recently heard a story of a man struggling with alcoholism. For 17 years, he struggled. His wife became part of a small group. She was finally able to persuade him to join her. There were times he showed up at small group drunk, surrounded by a group of people who loved and supported him. He's now been sober for 3 years. God is in the process of making that man new. Relationships with his wife and his children being made new. God is using people of the promise to help restore his life. This morning I was going to be able to ask John to come and tell you about another place where we just wanted to try to make a difference this week, but snow ruined the opportunity. where the opportunity just to be able to take and share lunch with the staff at Sauk Rapids schools, to be able to be a part of that, to be able to say we love you and appreciate you. We'll have to save that for another day, another time. But when that takes place, we'll try to let you know so that you can pray, so that that lunch is received in the spirit that it's given. So when God's people do things, like helping a chaplain in his hospice ministry, you won't believe how you have encouraged the chaplain with the gifts that you've given. What a boost it has been as you have participated and brought things like bird seed and paper products to be able to help with that. Or you fill a shoebox, as so many of us did. So a child somewhere receives not just a gift, but the opportunity to be able to experience the love of Christ. All of these are shining examples of what it means to live in light of the future. God is on a redemptive mission. He's designed the church to be able to carry out that mission. The question that hangs in the air is whether or not we'll see it and be a part of it. The fact is this: God will redeem with us or without us. But wouldn't it be better if he did it with us? I've got one more example for you today. It's an example of the difference that you make when on these first Sundays of the month, when the ushers stand back there with the offering plates at the end of the service, and you place some money in that offering plate, of the difference that it makes. I recently received this note. Hey, Art. It was written by a younger person. Hey. I wanted to send you an email regarding the resident you and your congregation had previously helped with funds to get her and her daughter into an apartment. We've had an opportunity that's been developing with one of the counselors, advisors at Anna Marie's shelter, where she finds people who are in that place where a gift could really help them. And she calls and says, would you be able to help? And so we helped. And here's what she says. They have gone and left the shelter. Couldn't be more happy. They've called me with an update, and everything is going really well. The woman is so happy that she can rebuild her life on her own terms for the first time in a very long time. She stated she has started her job, will be able to be financially stable, and she did it by herself, and she is so excited for what else is to come. She and the staff here at Anna Marie's Alliance want to thank all of you for your generous contribution that assisted in a woman and child starting over in a violence-free life. That's living in light of the future. We look forward to working with you more and sharing these beautiful stories so that you can pass them on. And then it's signed by Bree. I'd invited Bree to come here today, but she's giving birth. So we decided that was a good reason to give an excuse. God's making all things new all around us. Will we see it? Will we be part of it? Paul, then, he writes, that's why we never give up. That's why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day, for our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory. That's a forever glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So, don't look at the troubles we can see now. We fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen, the realities of heaven. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. So let me remind you of the promise one more time, where God says, I am making all things new. And that includes you. you can be made new. Put on the image of Christ and then be renewed. That is why God sent Jesus as a baby to live among us and to be able to show us the way. And here is what Jesus wants to do for you, wants to do in you, to the promise that if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. When you commit your life to be one of his followers, God makes you new. And so remember the invitation Jesus made to his disciples. He simply said, follow me, follow me. And they left everything, they surrendered it all, as we have sung today, and they left to follow him. That which had been most important to them, left behind, so they could join and become a part of his eternal mission, where everything is made new. And so as people of the promise, let's remember our future. Let's live in light of that future. It is, after all, the reason why God sent Jesus as a baby to live among us and to show us the way. And based on that, you want to know something? I love Christmas. I have to love God for doing all of that for me.